We're coming, and we ain't backing down.
We don't need a bunch of cats in here looking in the mirror.
Everybody just do your job. You understand that?
Hey, will you shut up?
I'm bitterly disappointed with the officiating today.
Guys being dudes.
And they run through our like through a tin horn, man.
Thank you, Lee. A very special treat. One that's been overdue. Long time coming, in my opinion. I'm Alex Kirshner with Richard Johnson and Bill Connelly of ESPN. Bill, welcome to Split Zone Duo.
It's a long time coming indeed. Happy to be here.
This is a big day for you. We are recording this on September 2nd. September 2nd also happens to be the day of release of Forward Progress, your new book about college football.
That is correct.
How are you feeling? Have we rigged the Amazon book-selling algorithm in your favor yet?
Apparently, that's an ongoing thing. I think, we got a decent number of pre-orders there, but that's apparently how you sell books in 2025 is you go on podcasts and you tell everybody to buy on Amazon, and then you just hope everything kind of flows from there. So that's what I'm telling people.
So this is your third book. Do I have that right?
Correct. The other one self-published, one kind of minor imprint or whatever. This is the biggest deal so far, we'll say, and also the hardest book to write so far. But yeah, this is the first one since, when did 50 Best come out? Like 2016, something like that. It's been a little while now.
I was going to say, so you're writing about something that is quite literally rapidly changing every day.
Yep.
To an extent that I imagine closing the book was pretty difficult.
It was infuriating. So it was it May 7th? It was early May when the manuscript was officially locked. And if you recall...
And the house case, as we know,
correct,
closed on April 15th when it was supposed to.
All I asked from this sport was in the first 4 months or 3.5 months of the off season, like finalize the house case. We all know it's going to get finalized. We just go ahead and lock it down so I know for sure. And this whole thing where, we've been debating what the next playoff's going to look like for a year and a half. Let's go ahead and finalize that in April too. Nope, neither one. So a couple TBDs, but I guess that's why... I just have to sell enough to write a second edition of the book. And so in the second edition, I'll get all this stuff. And then, of course, 13 other things will be outdated when that one comes out.
Obviously.
Bill, I enjoyed this book. Thank you for sending me an advance copy. And I'll tell you what I specifically enjoyed about it. Spoiler for everyone, it is a book about sort of all of this, what is going on with college football. And it alludes to, it doesn't just allude to, it writes specifically you do about some of the mess that's involved in the sport. But at no point in the, how many pages was it? It was a lot of pages.
Like 270-ish.
Yeah. At no point in those 270-ish pages did I feel like you were just surrendering to doomerism. Like, what an unsalvageable mess. It's the Wild West. It's over. I assume from the title of the book being Forward Progress, it's a little bit optimistic, kind of staring out at the horizon, that your goal was to write a book about the current situation in the sport and acknowledge what it is, but not to just be boringly kind of nihilist about it.
Right. I'm sure there's plenty of nihilism in there from page to page, but no, this was, well, first of all, I needed a football term, and Forward Progress is really the only one that made any sense. So that, but I like to think it was pretty optimistic anyway. I think it was, I wrote this book, I think first for myself, just to figure out what I think about certain things, because it really was, we were coworkers at SB Nation for a long time. In 2017, I did the whole run for commissioner thing. And I had this clear vision of here's what I would change about college football. And I started to realize, with so much changing rapidly, we react to each thing that comes out. And I didn't really have a vision anymore for how I thought things should be. Not that that's what will happen is whatever I decide or anything, but I didn't know where I thought certain things should go. So yeah, just walking through the process of isolating each one of those. Let's look at history of conference realignment, history of arguing about a playoff, history of arguing about paying players, which honestly, that chapter, it was the hardest by far, not only because it wasn't finalized, the House settlement wasn't finalized when the manuscript was due, but also just because that's like 3 books in one. And I had to limit it to about 10,000 words and figure out what really mattered. So I felt like I kind of did it a disservice, but there have been books written about it. There'll be more books. It's fine. But no, just kind of walking through each one of those and figuring out, number one, like we know where things are right now. The money is being has gravitated towards a very, very, very small group of schools who are throwing their financial leverage around as much as possible. It's kind of throwing a lot of things into uncertainty, but at the same time, ratings are great. Attendance is good. Like the Saturdays still feel like Saturdays, and certain teams that are outside of that little bunch sure seem to care a lot about football still, and are trying really hard to win at it. So it really, it wasn't all that hard to be optimistic because those things still happen. I just, there are warning signs here. We have not killed college football. Like every single time something happens that changes that we don't like, we immediately declare the sport dead. Well, sport's not dead. Sport's doing really well, but there are warning signs we need to watch out for, and kind of walk through those too.
Do you think that college football of the future, let me ask that a better way. How do you divorce the fact that college football is a bullet train moving in one direction with like the fact that you have this link to a past that is just not, it ain't coming back. You know what I mean? And the way that you grew up with the sport, and you could say this about so many different things in life, but as something we hold very dear and we craft our entire lives around it pretty much. How do you reconcile those two things personally?
Well, what's funny is, I still somehow, I don't know how I've pulled this off, but I still live in my college town 28 years after I moved here.
Columbia, Missouri, for those
correct.
not hip to it.
And so one really cool thing for me is, I go to Mizzou home games. I don't stay at Mizzou home games because I get itchy because there's so much going on. And so I'm one of those people, I leave after like a quarter and a half. But I get that taste, and I go to the tailgate and I see my friends. And the bottom line is the people I tailgate with in 2025 are the same ones I was tailgating with in 2015, mostly the same ones I was tailgating with in 2005. And so like that experience hasn't hardly changed at all. And I think I kind of use that as, however I stumbled into this career, I stumbled into it as a fan, writing as a fan. And, I like to use that experience as a reminder that, if you're a fan, the teams your team plays has maybe changed. For some, no, but, for Missouri, it obviously changed pretty drastically about 14 years ago. And, your relationship to certain rivals and whatnot changes, but your experience as a fan, other than prices going up dramatically, as happens occasionally, it really hasn't changed all that much. You're still going in the same entrance that you were 20 years ago. You're maybe tailgating with the same people. You have your same habits, and that's really cool. And that's something that college football has that so few other sports have. So it is still rooted in that history. I think obviously, Missouri's not going to ever play in a Big 8 again. There are certain things that have changed dramatically and won't ever go back. Probably won't ever be in a conference with Kansas again. But so much of that experience still is pretty similar. And that's a pretty cool thing.
Bill, one of the things that I thought was good about this book, and that I remember about it from reading, because I was reading it over a period of a couple of weeks, was you basically laid out some cautionary tales of sports that have actually, no sport has died, but, NASCAR and boxing, two examples of, they're definitely not as culturally preeminent as they once were. Right. Yeah. Like I don't think that even their fans would claim that they are. And you basically develop a set of rules for what to avoid so as to not fall into that trap. And one of the most notable ones is like keep your players from getting seriously maimed or killed, which has obviously been kind of the looming terror of like, when is this going to happen on a football field, as it's happened in like auto racing. And fortunately, so far at the highest levels it has now, but it doesn't mean it can't. But you had a lot of rules. Like you talked about, don't take your fans for granted. Don't transform too much overnight. Don't have like big, these are things that don't seem like they're going very well. Keep your product where your audience can actually watch it was one. Yeah. Thank you for, by the way, everyone listening to this. Soon it will go behind the paywall for our subscribers. But of course, so I guess I can't throw stones in a glass house. You have one about like, don't make the championship race too hard to follow. This is a problem that golf has now. Like, what's the FedEx Cup? Who knows? Who cares? Basically, how many of these rules that you laid out do you think are still being observed by college football? And how many do you think have been broken And I guess third follow up or a second follow up, if they've been broken, can they be unbroken?
Yeah, some of them can. I mean, that was like the last NASCAR kind of opened that chapter, and only partially because I work with Ryan McGee now, who was more than happy to regale me of all the details that he was legitimately warning about long ago, and turned out right about for the most part. But that was a very clear case of a sport with a very hardcore audience, those passionate fans who were married to this sport and had been for a long time. As it grew in popularity, it got drunk on popularity, tried to pursue even more of it. The famous, moving the Labor Day race out of Darlington for LA, all that kind of thing. And that was, and for a few years that went great. But I think the lasting lesson for all of this is you're never in as much control as you think you are of your own situation. And if some other obstacle comes about, you find out that the state of the hardcores. You're pursuing the casuals. That's great. That's where the real money is. But you need to keep the hardcores excited and aligned, because if the casuals go away for whatever reason and the money goes away, you're going to be leaning on them for a while, and you might find out that they've gone elsewhere. That's kind of how the NASCAR story went. Suddenly, with the late 2000s financial crash, those humongous sponsorship checks weren't happening anymore, and attendance went down. And suddenly they realized, like, we're rootless now. We as McGee said, we ripped some of our roots out of the ground, and there's no putting those back. And they've tried really hard these last few years, but their ceiling now as a entity, as a sport, is not nearly as high as it was in like 2005. And so, yeah, just kind of walking through that. Don't take your hardcores for granted. Don't change too much at once. We've definitely tested that boundary. Keep your, that was a big thing I think with boxing, was keeping your product where your audience could see it. Is all the big fights went to pay-per-view or HBO, which is, I guess, kind of pay-per-view. And I think that kind of changed the relationship, just in terms of, the big matches were still humongous, but nobody was watching the fights on a week-to-week basis anymore, at least not really. So just things like that, I think, did hurt. Obviously with boxing, athlete health became a major issue when a guy went into a coma on national television and died a few days later in the early 80s. But, a lot of this, fans hate fights over money. That was one of them. That I kind of pulled that from baseball a little bit, or really every professional sport.
Golf now.
Golf right now.
Yeah. Like I don't watch the week to week PGA Tour anymore. It's too much.
Yeah. But even like the point about the fight over money is, like, there is saying that they are playing for XYZ amount of dollars is not why people tune in to watch a specific golf tournament.
Yeah, if it's a big event, then you hear the big number and it kind of reinforces that it's a big event. But like on a week to
it can't be the tent pole,
right?
It can't be the tent pole.
No, and there are a lot of different ways you can fight over money, but that is certainly something that now that we are sharing money with athletes, and athletes are starting to understand what their value is, that is a bridge we'll be crossing in any number of different directions. Since the House settlement didn't finalize anything, it kind of started a new era of lawsuits and legal tests and fights and whatnot. And, we'll see exactly where that takes us. But I think, at the last one, after Understand Your Roots, I think the last lesson I learned was just, you're not in control of any of this, whether it's a health emergency, whether it's a financial crash, whether it's anything, a bunch of things we're not going to root for. But if that happens, you need to make sure you've made good decisions to keep that hardcore audience happy. And, that means playing games they want their teams to play. That's a big, I tried to come up with kind of a macro vision of what I thought of the healthiest possible version of the sport. And you basically get the teams, the opponents, the team wants to play, the fans want them to play, make sure the players are well taken care of, make sure everybody understands the stakes, which has always been a little tricky in college football. But like these big things, we can do whatever we want with these. We can change the way we schedule games and make sure that Mizzou, Kansas, and Bedlam and all these games that the old fans with all the money really miss, we can make sure those things happen. And right now we're just really not. Even with Mizzou, Kansas, they're playing now, next year, then like in the 2030s a couple times, and that's it. That's better than nothing, but it's still not what the fans prefer.
These things always get renewed in like 4-year blocks. This is what's happened with Pitt, with both West Virginia and Penn State. It's like you bring it back. It's like, oh, this was cool. 4 years. It's like, are you going to renew it again? You never know. In some cases, no.
The last thing I have is we both are obsessed with European soccer. And I think your experiences there certainly inform your experience in college football, because there are so many parallels with what European soccer has done or hasn't done recently. Super League, obviously, the biggest thing that they did not do a few years ago, after like the fans of the most major clubs, to whom, quite frankly, it would be fiscally responsible, if we're honest, to do the Super League, literally rebelled. So, you're a bigger German soccer guy than I am, but the Bundesliga and Germany's pyramid does a better job, sort of like maintaining its roots and maintaining its kind of connections to the fan and protecting things. They protect certain things versus the Premier League, which doesn't. Now I say that, and yes, Bayern Munich is
right. They're basically willing to keep tickets low and beer prices cheap, and games off a Monday night, and just like have the experience that they believe is the right one, even if it means Bayern makes 38 times more money than everybody else and wins the league. They don't care, because their fan experience is most important to them.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I basically was going to ask, like, what are the parallels in both good and bad that we've seen in the Premier League and the Bundesliga of the last few years, and European soccer in general, that we can kind of apply to what we're doing in college football?
Yeah, I mean, the concentration of wealth is like when you write about soccer, you start to understand college football more, which makes you help understand soccer more, and kind of goes back and forth. But yeah, the way the money has been concentrated, we see the impacts of that in Europe more than anything else. And it's really tricky, because even it with soccer, and now as we're seeing with college football too, for years when paying the players just wasn't an option, I didn't have to worry about the fact that, the two biggest things I tend to yell about were pay the players and protect as much competitive balance as possible. But now that we're paying players and they make their decisions based, at least in part, on, now they get a chance to play for their dream school and or play for a ton of money, they're going to go upward, and it's going to hurt all. There's
a tension between pay them and competitive balance.
Being parity friendly and talent friendly, player friendly, really is kind of at odds with itself a lot. And so we certainly see that with basically what amount to feeder clubs in soccer. And, the whether we're talking about like the Borussia Dortmunds of the world or even further down, you do get a lot of that where, they get the young player and they get a couple pretty good years out of them, and then they sell them for an insane amount of money to the really big clubs, who then get their, those players in their prime years, and you have to go find another one. It's not optimal, and also it's at least you make transfer fees off of it. We're not doing that in college football.
Which, oh my God, we've got it, but they got to be employees, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Yes, I know.
No, there's a huge similarity there. I mean, obviously, if we're talking really broadly, the similarity just in terms of being community institutions, that, I know everybody who runs a Premier League or owns a Premier League club now is thinking in terms of, we want to be like the NFL, but you're not. You're like college football, and there is a pretty big responsibility to the fans when, like, you're never leaving your location. This is where you're always going to be, and this is the club you're always going to be, and your fans have major ownership in that. So that's a big one. Honestly, the biggest difference with European, especially in Germany, but a lot of places in Europe and college football, is that European fans, especially German fans, protest everything they don't like. They throw a fit.
Manchester United fans marched on their own stadium when the Super League thing happened. I've said this on our show before multiple times, like, Alabama fans, y'all aren't about it like that.
No. Oklahoma fans, basically, when Bedlam died, they basically said, we won. Bye, guys. And that was it.
And Bill, this is a thing that a thing that happens over there is sometimes teams basically run into effectively like bankruptcy, right? Like they have a bad owner or whatever. It happens to a lot of the lower teams, but it has happened to some teams that are big in stature over there and were big like 15, 20 years ago, like Leeds, for instance. They ran into financial horror basically, and they ended up falling down the pyramid. And there's this thing over there that like rival fans like point and laugh at that phenomenon instead of realizing like,
That could be
oh,
us.
that could happen to us, right? And that's kind of the, if there are parallels between, to hit it close to home, Missouri and Kansas, like Missouri goes to the SEC and Missouri fans say, we won, see ya, we're never going to play again. But it's like, no, like Missouri, you mess around and don't take this seriously, and they're not going to keep you around in 2030 when we do this all again.
Yeah, there is we do seem to come across that kind of vision of where things go next, where now that we have two conferences with basically all the brands, now they're going to turn on their conference mates and make it even more concentrated party. Because that's, I had this line in the book, but that's why I watch college sports. It's for the financial leverage.
Of course.
But no,
it is the sport where you can literally see a football team playing for a university's institutional life sometimes.
Yeah.
Like this is going to happen over the next few years. Like Indiana will probably be inside the plexiglass whenever the next thing happens because their football program will have done some things in the 2020s. Like I feel like these next couple of coaching hires that every Big Ten and SEC team, like that Maryland makes, for instance, their next coaching hire, should they make one if they moved on from Mike Locksley, like that could be the guy who decides whether you are in college football A or college football B going forward. It absolutely could.
And I can't decide what I think is most likely. I mean, I think we definitely don't know for sure how this is going to go, just like we never got to force perfectly balanced super conferences, 16 teams each, like we thought we would like 15 years ago. It's kind of a mutated version is whatever we get in the future. And I haven't decided for sure whether I think it is just going to be like these conferences turn on themselves, or just basically Alabama telling Mississippi State, you're so lucky to be here, we're now going to take a lot more of the media rights because we know you're not, you can leave if you want. But we're just going to, that's going to obviously potentially be a big part of the next one. But also at the same time, one of the points I tried to make in the Super League, I think Ralph Russo had the best quote about it, was just that like, we kind of are in the Super League. Like they're letting the Big 12 and ACC and Group of Five take playoff spots still, but they've already arranged to take all the money. We basically, with this, like the stroke of a proverbial pen, we added 7 games to the end of the college football season and just magically created $700 million new dollars in an era where suddenly we have to pay the athletes what they, have been owed for a long time. And that money could have kind of funded the future of the sport. And the Big Ten and SEC went, nope, we're going to take all that. But sorry, guys, ACC and Big 12, you can have a little more. Group of Five, you're not going to take a penny more, basically. And that concentration, really, it already threatened to cut off a certain level of the sport that used to consider itself power conferences. And if we just keep going, any moment we could change this. Any moment we could stop doing the concentration thing. But we don't really seem to have a motivation to at the moment. And if it gets to the next contract renegotiations for all these media rights deals and everything else, I don't exactly know what'll happen. I still don't think a real Super League, kind of all these PE-backed things that have popped up over the last couple of years, would basically require the Big Ten and SEC to give up power and give up financial advantages. And I don't think there's nobody to force them to do that. There's no reason for them to do that. So I don't think those are realistic yet. But yeah, if we just continue to allow the concentration of teams to get smaller and smaller, we know where this heads.
And you make the point in your last chapter of the book that people have been a little overwrought historically about saying this thing is going to kill college football. Like this is going to be it. And it has never been true. It wasn't true when they integrated. It wasn't true when they put games on television. It wasn't true when players started getting athletic scholarships or getting paid. It hasn't been true yet. But that it's not impossible.
Right. Like, we don't want to find out where the line is. Like, that's kind of one of the major lessons here is we never know. And we can, maybe the line's a lot further away than we think, but we don't want to find out. Because once you've crossed that line, it's really, really hard to recover whatever gets broken at that point. So
we're going to make people read the book to find out exactly what you do about it. But I will point out on the show that we did not just have you on to bitch about this with no ideas for solutions whatsoever. And you have put your name on some general outlines, I would say, of things that you think are sensible, wise. Are you optimistic that any of those might be enacted? Feel free to talk about them if you want.
I don't think the SEC is going to start sharing more money with other conferences anytime soon, or the Big Ten. That is certainly not where trends point. But the one The most optimistic thing I can say is, if these things are threatening to become problems in the future, and we're basically going to isolate Iowa State and say, I know, like, you're never actually a threat to win any sort of major title or beat Texas or the major schools, and you bring 57,000 fans to home games anyway because this is an amazing sport. All we have to do is let you be part of the party, and you're going to bring tons of fans. But we're not going to do that anymore. You are officially not part of the party. We're just going to start cutting fan bases off or whatever. Like, it feels like we could go pretty far in that direction. But all I can really say, the most optimistic thing is 10 years ago, it never, ever really felt like we were going to get to the point. We're paying players. Like, that it took like 70 years of nonsense to get to that point. And I think if we can do that, then a lot of big changes that don't seem even slightly realistic now, maybe they'll seem realistic in the future. Like, short term, we know where things are headed in the short term, and it might lead us to disaster at some point, but maybe it won't. And maybe it'll lead us to the brink of that disaster. And then we realize what we should have been doing all along. I don't know, but if we made the biggest imaginable change, we can make a lot of other changes too.
The book is Forward Progress, the definitive guide to the future of college football. Rig those algorithms,
That's
folks.
right.
Like, get that thing to the top of the Amazon and the Times bestsellers, and buy it wherever you buy books. Bill, will you stick with us after the jump to talk a bit about the 2025 college football season to date?
Absolutely.